HOA fined me for ranch violations, forgot I owned the land and banned them from farming. When I bought the old Weston Ranch, I thought I was buying peace, cattle, quiet skies, and clean air. That's all I was looking for. I didn't expect drama, certainly not the kind that would spiral into lawsuits, local outrage, and a complete community reckoning. But that's what happened. My name's Caleb Norris, 39. Former IT analyst turned rancher after life in Dallas burned me out like a spent wire. I came out here for the wide, open space, not HOA threats tucked into plastic bags on fence posts. 3 months after I moved in, I got my first violation. Apparently, leaving hay bales visible from the road, a private gravel lane no one but me and two neighbors used, was unsightly. That was odd. There was no HOA. At least not on any of my closing documents. So I laughed it off. But they didn't stop. Unauthorized fencing, improper livestock containment, failure to attend community weed abatement program. It escalated. Fast. Then came the fines. And I started asking questions. Prompt mo jiao gai kan kong tao hinhan. Chi viet prompt. The camera pulls back slowly from a broken gate, swinging limply on one hinge. Beyond it, two trucks are stuck deep in the mud, one tilted at a dangerous angle. Its cargo of farming equipment spilled across the pasture. A woman in designer boots screams into her phone, drenched in rain, while local ranchers watch in stunned silence. The words trespassing and lawsuit hang heavy in the air as the wind catches a ripped HOA flag tangled in the fence. Title I, they fined me for ranch violations. I own the land and banned their farming. Title II, HOA tried to control my ranch. Now their crops are banned and so are they. Title III, Karen fined me for violations. Forgot I owned the land she was farming on. Part 1. The land I bought wasn't the only thing they got wrong. When I bought the old Weston Ranch, I thought I was buying peace, cattle, quiet skies, and clean air. That's all I was looking for. I didn't expect drama. Certainly not the kind that would spiral into lawsuits, local outrage, and a complete community reckoning, but that's what happened. My name's Caleb Norris, 39. Former IT analyst turned rancher after life in Dallas burned me out like a spent wire. I came out here for the wide, open space, not HOA threats, tucked into plastic bags on fence posts. 3 months after I moved in, I got my first violation. Apparently, leaving hay bales visible from the road, a private gravel lane no one but me and two neighbors used, was unsightly. That was odd. There was no HOA, at least not on any of my closing documents. So I laughed it off, but they didn't stop. Unauthorized fencing, improper livestock containment, failure to attend community weed abatement program. It escalated. Fast. Then came the fines, and I started asking questions. When I first saw Weston Ranch, it was in the dead heat of August, and I was standing on cracked earth beneath a dust-choked sky. Nothing looked pristine or polished, not like the manicured homes I'd left behind in North Dallas. But I stood there, boots sinking a little in the dirt, and something in me felt still for the first time in years. I just signed the deed on 168 acres rolling hills, 2 barns in disrepair, a rundown 1920s ranch house, and 2 ponds that hadn't seen good rain in months. But it was mine. Every last acre. No neighbors looking over my fence. No committee telling me my porch lights were too bright. No HOA, or so I was told. I moved in 2 weeks later with 3 rescue dogs, a used tractor, and more optimism than sense. The fixer-upper ranch house had no central air and smelled like old cedar, but I didn't care. I was building something. Away from the city, away from the noise, and most of all, away from people who acted like they owned the world because they chaired some committee. Turns out I hadn't gone far enough. I found the first note wedged into my mailbox, no postage, no envelope, just a single typed sheet in all caps. Notice of violation, improper stacking of hay bales visible from common road. This is a breach of community aesthetic standards. Fine $50, due within 10 business days. I laughed. First of all, there was no common road. The gravel lane they meant was technically part of my property, clearly drawn on the plat map. Second, the hay bales. They were barely 3 days old, still golden, fresh. And third, I didn't belong to any HOA, so I ignored it. Then came another, and another. I finally met her, the sender of the fines, 3 weeks later. She pulled up in a shiny white SUV while I was knee-deep in the West Field, repairing a busted irrigation pipe. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just marched up in wedge sandals and sunglasses bigger than her forehead. "I'm Denise Carlson," she said, "president of the West Hollow Meadows HOA. I blinked. West Hollow Meadows is 3 miles east of here. We expanded, she said, as if that explained everything. No one told me. I'm not part of that HOA. This land was never under your jurisdiction. She waved a clipboard like a royal decree. We filed a petition last year, annexed the undeveloped lots and surrounding parcels. The board voted. It passed. Was this before or after I bought the place before? Technically, I squinted. Then why wasn't it in my disclosure documents? She clicked her pen. Sometimes things fall through the cracks. But we expect compliance now that you're part of the community. She handed me another notice. Failure to remove unauthorized structure, rusting tractor in front yard. Fine $125. I told her exactly where she could shove it. Politely. Sort of. I drove straight to the county assessor's office that afternoon, sweaty and pissed. The clerk, a kind older guy named Mike, pulled up my parcel number. No HOA listed on file. He said, tapping his screen, "You're zoned as agricultural. No special restrictions. No CCNRs. Then what is West Hollow Meadows doing sending me fines?" He frowned. "They have a legal HOA because if you're not signed into one, they got no authority out here." That's what I thought. He printed out a copy of my plat map, plus a zoning certificate. I tucked them in my glove box. It wasn't over. In the next month, my gate was padlocked one morning with a bright orange tag subject to lien under West Hollow Meadows Enforcement Code. A contractor I hired to trench new water lines backed out after someone from the HOA warned him I had pending violations. My feed delivery was turned away by a woman in a neon vest, claiming unauthorized vehicle traffic through the protected preserve zone. The kicker. The preserve zone was my north pasture. They'd put a tiny vinyl sign there overnight. That's when I started digging. What I found was sleazy brilliance. West Hollow Meadows was a real HOA. Sure, but only for 22 homes built in the early 2000s on 2 cul-de-sacs across the ridge. Their bylaws said they could petition for expansion of jurisdiction if 75% of surrounding landowners agreed. Problem was, I never agreed. Turns out, Denise Karen had added my property to their expansion map as pending annexation. She filed the map with the county clerk, not the zoning board, and began operating as if I joined. Most people didn't fight it. They didn't know better. But I had documentation. Still, that didn't stop them from showing up. It was a Thursday morning when I saw them on my land again. 2 men, 1 woman. They were walking along the lower field, carrying clipboards, snapping photos of my barn. I'd had enough. I jumped the ATV, rolled straight toward them, and demanded to know what the hell they were doing. "Inspection," one muttered, for what he mumbled. "Permitting concerns. That's my private property." Denise showed up 20 minutes later, smug as ever. She waved another notice. "Improper storage of chemicals. That old tank near your shed. It's unregistered. It was an antique diesel tank, sealed and empty. I'm giving you one more chance," she said. "Either comply or we file a lien." That was it. I smiled at her. Not the friendly kind. The kind that meant I'm done playing. I didn't go back to the barn that day. I didn't call my lawyer. I didn't even call the sheriff, not yet. Instead, I sat down at my rickety kitchen table with a cold beer and all the paperwork. I had deeds, maps, zoning records, even a crumpled note I'd scribbled on a feed sack the day Denise first showed up, because I was done reacting. It was time to fight. The next morning, I called an old buddy from Dallas, Marcus Chan, former GIS analyst, now working for a private survey firm. I offered to pay double if he could get out to Weston Ranch by the weekend. He was there by Friday, drone in tow, full kit loaded into his SUV. By Monday, I had what I needed: a comprehensive land survey overlaid with satellite data, county zoning layers, and parcel boundaries. The result not only was Weston Ranch entirely outside the HOA's existing authority, but a full 5 acres of land Denise's HOA had leased for communal farming was actually within my southern boundary fence. They'd been growing crops on my property. That wasn't just trespass, that was theft. I'd always found it strange that a strip of cultivated land sat just behind the tree line at the south end of my pasture, but it was down a steep incline, and I'd been too busy fixing irrigation and chasing stray cattle to investigate. Turns out, what they called a community garden in HOA newsletters was a full-scale farm plot: corn, tomatoes, beans, and even rows of sunflowers, all being rotated on a seasonal schedule. They'd cut through my fence months ago and replaced it with a new post shifted 10 feet inward to make it look legitimate. And they were making money off it. I found an HOA newsletter online where Denise proudly proclaimed their organic produce program brought in over $9 last season through local farmers markets. $9 grand on land that wasn't hers. I didn't tell her right away. I wanted to watch her build her case against me. I let her send one more notice, this one for livestock encroachment, because my longhorns had gotten too close to their HOA picnic zone on my land. So I smiled and filed a cease and desist, hand-delivered it to her office, which was just the converted garage of her McMansion, with a notarized copy of the survey and the zoning certificate tucked neatly behind it. She barely looked up when I walked in. "You're not allowed in here during board meetings." I slid the envelope across her fake mahogany desk. "Actually," I said, "you're the one who's not allowed. Not on my property, not anymore." I saw the blood drain from her face as she read. By sundown that day, my gate was vandalized. Again. This time, someone had spray-painted the words, "You don't belong here." Classic Karen move when the power begins to slip. The claws come out. The next day, a drone hovered low over my fields for hours. Then came the noise complaints filed with the county, even though my nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. Someone started reporting me for animal neglect, which prompted an inspection from the local Ag Extension office. They showed up, saw my herd was healthier than ever, and left with nothing but compliments. But I knew who was behind it. Denise Carlson wasn't just petty, she was desperate. Because if she lost control of the farming plot, she'd lose more than money, she'd lose authority. And Karen couldn't live without that. Marcus, my surveyor buddy, found something else. He'd been poking around property transfers near the ranch and found a string of suspicious annexations over the past 2 years, all pushed through by the same HOA board. None were approved by the county zoning office. "I don't think this is just your property," he said. "I think she's trying to turn the whole ridge into her own empire." He was right. A dozen small parcels owned by retirees, single parents, farmers without legal teams, had been annexed into West Hollow Meadows through a technical loophole. Some of them didn't even know it until the fines showed up. She called it unification. I called it fraud. That's when I met Javier. He was a goat farmer living on a 3-acre plot just down the slope. One day I caught him outside repairing a fence and offered to lend a hand. We got to talking. Turns out he'd been fined 3 times for unapproved animal shelter design, even though his barn was built in 1984 and grandfathered in under county code. "She sends them," he said, shaking his head. "Those clipboard people. They come, take pictures, write notes. I tell them to leave. One time they called the sheriff." Sheriff laughed. Then he added something that stuck. "You're the first one to fight back." That's when I realized they were all afraid of her. Not because she had power, but because she pretended she did. And no one had stopped her. Until now. Denise showed up one last time, pulled up in her SUV, this time dressed like she was headed to court: black skirt suit, red heels, clutching a leather binder thick with papers. I was out front, sanding a broken fence post. "You've made a mistake," she said. I didn't answer. She tried again. "If you ban the garden, You'll be responsible for breaking a community program that feeds dozens of families. We have contracts, volunteers, school partnerships. You're trespassing, I said without looking up. She took a step closer. You're new here. Caleb, you don't understand how things work. That land may be yours on paper, but the community has a right to access. It's been used for years. I met her eyes. Not anymore. Then I handed her my final notice. Effective immediately, Weston Ranch is no longer accessible to members of West Hollow Meadows HOA. All leases, permissions, informal agreements, and activities are revoked. Trespassers will be prosecuted. She looked at it like it was written in a foreign language. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. I turned and walked away. I wish I could say she stopped after that. That after I banned them from my land and handed her that cease and desist, Karen, sorry, Denise just packed up her clipboard and tucked tail back to her HOA thrones. But that's not how this kind of control works. She didn't run, she retaliated. The next week, a neighbor's chickens were poisoned. Another had a tractor tire slashed clean through. Javier's goats got out one night after a fence was clipped, and the HOA reported him for public nuisance. I began documenting everything. Cameras, statements, even photos of every new inspection volunteer I caught on my game cams, the HOA's little foot soldiers. They didn't wear badges. They wore matching teal polos with a stitched tree logo and a slogan beneath one land, one community, one standard. Sounded more like a cult than a homeowners association. That's when I started calling it what it really was. A fake government, pretending to rule, with no votes, no oversight, no limits. Her name was Amber Keller, young, mid-20s, fast-talking and nervous. She showed up at my gate late one Sunday afternoon with a folder clutched to her chest. I was the secretary for the HOA board. She blurted, I quit last week. I can't. I didn't sign up for this. I let her in. She poured everything out over 2 cups of lukewarm coffee. Turns out, Denise had been fabricating not just authority, but documents, fake votes, forged petitions, faux board resolutions dated and notarized after the fact. Amber had proof, meeting notes, drafts, copies of annexation documents with typed signatures, hers included. She used our names like stamps, Amber said, eyes red. Half the board doesn't even know they voted on anything. Then she showed me the map, the expansion plan. They called it Project Horizon. It was an internal HOA presentation slide deck, a full PDF. I still have it. On slide 3 in bold target 2025, 40 parcels integrated under unified policy, vision, an aesthetic-driven, standardized agricultural community. The slides went on to list enforcement tactics, soft pressure mailers, neighbor-to-neighbor complaints, symbolic enforcement visible signs, uniforms, park patrols, lien simulation filing faux violations to trigger mortgage alerts. The worst part, slide 8 had my name, Caleb Foster, resistive parcel, priority obstacle. That's what I was to her, an obstacle. I sent copies to Javier, then to the Sanders family down the road, then to old Mrs. Whitmore, who'd lived on her 10-acre homestead since 1972 and had been fined $500 for having a non-compliant garage paint tone. Turns out, Denise's HOA had been steamrolling this region for nearly 3 years, under the radar capitalizing on legal confusion and silence, but silence was over. We started a group, informal at first, a string of group texts, emails, porch meetings. Then we made it formal, Free Weston Ridge we called it. By week 2, we had 17 landowners on record. We filed a collective lawsuit with the county. During the early hearings, the county clerk delivered the final blow. A quiet woman named Patricia, maybe 60s, stood up in court and said, I've reviewed every annexation submitted by the West Hollow Meadows HOA since 2022. She held up a stack of papers. All of them are unenforceable. None were approved by zoning, planning, or land management. They were never even reviewed. She looked Denise straight in the eye. You built your authority on paper. That's all it ever was. Paper. I wish I could describe her face. Denise, the queen bee, the clipboard crusader, the self-proclaimed protector of aesthetic integrity, stood there trembling. Her voice cracked. This is slander. This is targeted harassment. These people are just bitter loners. The judge cut her off. Mrs. Carlson, what you've done is not only unethical, it borders on criminal impersonation of public authority. If proven, this court will refer your conduct for investigation. The room went silent. Amber, sitting behind me, squeezed my shoulder. Within a month, the following occurred. The HOA's expansion was voided. All back fines were declared invalid. A restraining order was filed against Denise Carlson, preventing her or any of her inspectors from entering non-HOA lands. But that wasn't the end of it, because the damage had been done. Crops stolen, reputations smeared, ranchers humiliated, elderly folks gaslit into silence. We weren't going to let that stand. They tried to replace our history with plastic fences and neighborhood bylaws. They forgot we remember where every fence post used to be. Winning the court case was one thing, but out here, in the dirt and the wind, justice wasn't a gavel, it was action. After the injunction was filed against Denise, West Hollow Meadows HOA went quiet publicly. Anyway, their newsletter ceased. No more teal-shirted patrols, no more fines, no more threats of liens or aesthetic integrity violations. But we knew that wasn't the end of it. Fake HOAs don't die easy. They fade, regroup, and return under different names. Property councils, community alliances, resident quality boards. Karenism doesn't need a permit, it just needs a stage. So we made sure the stage was gone. Amber's idea was bold, beautiful, and absolutely brilliant. What if we take the land they tried to annex, she said, and we bind it in protection, legal, public, permanent, with some pro bono help from Marcus and a zoning lawyer he knew in Austin. We formed the Weston Ridge Land Trust, a formal collective of private landowners agreeing to permanent HOA exclusion clauses and community oversight of external governance. In short, a firewall. You want to annex someone here again. You'll need unanimous consent, a public vote, county review, and a letter from the trust. Good luck with that. Javier's barn caught fire in late September. Investigators found traces of accelerant. He survived, barely, and so did 2 of his goats, thanks to his dog waking him up. We all knew who was behind it, but proving arson is like catching smoke. It doesn't matter if you know the match unless you see it thrown. That night, we gathered at my barn, 15 families. Everyone's shaken. We passed around a hat and raised $12,000 in under an hour. The next morning, we filed paperwork to open what we called the Karen Defense Fund to pay for cameras, legal filings, replacement gear, and protection for any resident retaliated against by rogue HOA aggression. The local paper picked it up, then the state paper. Within 3 days, we had $40,000 in donations from all over Texas. They say the devil doesn't retreat, she just changes her strategy. Denise went underground. Literally. Amber intercepted an email thread forwarded by a sympathetic ex-board member showing that Denise had begun organizing private covenant circles, unregistered homeowner agreements that mirrored HOA restrictions but were opt-in. Except they weren't. People were tricked into signing maintenance waivers that included fine print control over landscaping, fencing, even livestock density. They called it neighborly improvement committees. It was HOA 2.0. We decided to go public. I stood up at the Weston County Hall on a windy Tuesday night, facing a crowd of about 80 people, ranchers, homeowners, school teachers, even 2 reporters from the Austin Tribune. We told them everything. Amber read aloud the fake bylaws Denise had used. Marcus showed aerial overlays of the land she'd annexed. Javier, bandaged and limping, stood up and pointed to his burned barn on the projector. And then I said, they tried to turn Weston Ridge into a gated kingdom, but they forgot this is ranch land, not suburbia. We don't answer to clipboards. The applause lasted nearly 3 minutes. That's when the sheriff, who'd been sitting quietly at the back, took the mic and said the words we'd all been waiting to hear. We're opening a criminal investigation into West Hollow Meadows HOA leadership. In the following weeks, subpoenas went out, Amber testified. So did two ex-inspectors, both of whom admitted they'd been given quotas a certain number of violations per month. They were told to fabricate if necessary. Just cite something, anything. They were told. We discovered that Denise had been pocketing membership dues from parcels she didn't even own, thousands in unauthorized payments. Worse, she'd signed at least one contract with a landscaping firm on behalf of a non-member's property. Forgery, fraud, trespassing, extortion. In February, Denise Carlson was arrested. Mugshot on the local news. Charges 5 counts of fraudulent misrepresentation, 3 of impersonating a public official, and 1 of criminal conspiracy. Her house went up for sale in April. Funny how the absence of tyranny feels like fresh air. We still have disputes out here, but now we settle them like grown folk. At the fence line, with a handshake and a beer, the Weston Ridge Land Trust now has 42 parcels signed on. What started with one rancher getting fined for cattle placement ended in a full-blown fake governance collapse. We host potlucks once a month. Javier rebuilt his barn stronger this time. Amber's running for the county land council. As for me, I still don't mow the weeds behind my barn. I still let the longhorns roam, and I still keep a copy of that first violation notice, unauthorized ranch activity, pinned to the wall of my tax shed. It reminds me how close we came to losing what mattered. They thought they could tame the land, that they could tame us. They learned the hard way, you can't fence in freedom, and you sure as hell can't find it. They thought the land was theirs because they printed a map, but the land has memory, and it remembered us. I never thought I'd sit in a courtroom and hear a woman be prosecuted for trying to run a fake government. Yet there she was, Denise Carlson, hair flat, no sunglasses, no clipboard, just another defendant in a gray suit and chains around her ankles. Her defense tried to paint her as a misunderstood visionary. The jury didn't buy it. The documents spoke louder. Forged zoning letters, counterfeit parcel maps, emails giving orders to apply psychological pressure to non-compliant ranchers. They called it strategic community shaping. We called it what it was, domination by deception. She was convicted on 5 charges, sentenced to 6 years, with eligibility for parole in 2. But the sentence wasn't the justice that mattered most. The real reckoning came after. In the letters, the ones we all started getting handwritten, typed, emailed, messaged in awkward apology, not from Denise. No, she never said a word, but from her followers. Those volunteers in teal polos, those neighbors who reported us for violations, the ones who took photos over fences, who cited us for planting tomatoes in front yards or painting our barns non-neutral colors. They began to realize they were part of a machine, and they'd helped build it. Some apologized, some just moved away, but the most important ones stayed and tried to make it right. Javier's old neighbor planted him new apple trees. The Whitmore's fence was rebuilt by 3 former HOA members. Amber got offered a full-time job on the county's Rural Development Board. 3 months after the verdict, I got a certified letter from the real estate firm that once partnered with West Hollow Meadows HOA. Inside a formal settlement agreement, turns out the firm had been warned by their own lawyers about the illegality of Denise's expansion and looked the other way. Now that the case had gone public, they wanted out. They offered every rancher who'd been falsely cited a payout for damages. I was offered $48,000. I accepted, but not for me. We used the money to start the Freedom Acres Legal Project, a network of lawyers and landowners fighting back against fake HOAs across the state. In under a year, we helped shut down 6 more HOA abuse cases. Weston Ridge stands taller now. We built a community board, not an HOA made of ranchers, teachers, and elders. We don't vote on paint shades. We vote on real things, like well sharing, school bus routes, community livestock feed days, and every spring, on the first Saturday of March, we hold a festival, no fines, just freedom, live music, barbecue, kids roping hay bales and laughing. One year, someone made a piñata shaped like a clipboard. We let the goats destroy it. We learned that tyranny doesn't always come with boots or guns. Sometimes it comes with bylaws, with forced smiles, with polite language that hides deep entitlement, with people who think neatness matters more than neighbors. But we also learned this. You are not powerless even when the papers say you are. You are not alone even when they isolate you with fear. And when you stand your ground, others will stand beside you. If this story stirred something in you, anger, hope, understanding, then share it. Talk about it. Challenge the systems that pretend to be for the good of the community, but silence voices beneath them. Ask questions, demand documents, know your rights, because fake power only exists in silence, and justice only rises when someone finally says, "Not on my land."